Maya, did you get the MAE WEST book yet?
Yes, I did, but it's so big. I used to be Snow White, but I drifted. Aloha and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marilyn Mendoza, the baby boomer booktuber. And yes, this is my February TBR a little late. And I did get this book from the library. It's called MAE WEST, It Ain't No Sin by Simon Louvish. And it has everything you want to know about MAE WEST. But I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to read it by the time I have to bring it back to the library. But I really think it's a worthwhile book from what I've read of it. It has everything you ever wanted to know about MAE WEST. And I'm interested. I'm a Brooklyn girl, so I want to know. This is also Black History Month. I ordered some books from a site other than Amazon because it was cheaper, but I didn't realize that it took so long to arrive. So I'm going to have to put the name in the cards, but it's coming like in a day or two. And one of them is Passing by Nella Larson. And I'll just read you a little of the blurb, but it's been around on booktube. Passing is a novel by American author Nella Larson, first published in 1929. Set primarily in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City in the 1920s, the story centers on the reunion of two childhood friends, Claire Kendry and Ira Redfield, and their increasing fascination with each other's lives. And it's about, from what I know, it's about one of the friends passes as white, and because they come from a light-skinned community or a light-skinned family. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm gonna find out. But this reminded me of a movie that I saw in 1958 that really made a big impression on me, and it was called Imitation of Life with Susan Conner. And Susan Conner played a girl who had a black mother, and she ran away and passed as white. And it really affected me, because when her mother died at the end and she had a traditional African American funeral, she comes back and she's sorry because her mother loved her so much. And in my little 8-year-old mind, I was torn apart, but I'm wondering what Passing is about, if it's similar to that. And also other books that I read about racial identity. Now, racial identity is something that exists in African American culture and also in Spanish culture, where you're trying to, I'm a bicultural person, and I'm trying to fit in with either one or both cultures is a very difficult thing, and I tell you that from experience. So my other book that I have, and I'm rereading it, is called Red Dust Road, and it's by a Scottish poet and author, Jackie Kay. And I'll read you a little about this. Now let me tell you, this is a reread for me, but I was initially both put off and also excited about the fact that the way she writes. But let me read to you about what it's about. There is a moment when, as a little girl, Jackie Kay realizes that her skin is a different color from that of her beloved mom and dad. Later in life, and pregnant with her own son, she decides to trace her birth parents. On a journey full of unexpected twists, turns, and deep emotions, she discovers that inheritance is about much more than genes, that we are shaped by songs as much as by cells, and that what triumphs ultimately is love. And let me go back into why I was very surprised by this book. Jackie Kay was born in Edinburgh. She's a poet, novelist, and writer of short stories. So she's very prolific and very popular in Scotland. But I didn't know of her, living in Hawaii. Okay, this is what really surprised me. Her first sentence is, Jonathan is suddenly there in the hotel corridor, leaning to the swimming pool area. Okay, I'm a writer, and if you're a writer or know about writers, you know that you never, according to Stephen King, use the word suddenly. And here it is in the first sentence. There's also a lot of editing mistakes, and there's also a lot of should nots in writing in here, yet it's a beautiful story. I shouldn't say yet it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. And it taught me a little bit about writing, that we shouldn't listen to people telling us what words we should use and what words we shouldn't use. Jackie Kay is a poet. I think she knows a little bit about words. And sometimes suddenly is the best word to use. During a reread, I'm starting to reread it. So I put it on my TBR because it's really a very important book about how it feels to be bicultural. I have 2 bicultural children, and I have 4 children in all, and we're all bicultural, and 2 are biracial. So this really interested me because I didn't know that much about how it is to be bicultural or biracial in Scotland. So this is a really interesting read, and I think it's good for Black History Month as well. The other book that I don't have, it's in the library waiting for me, is Hood Feminism, which is really popular around booktube as well. And I don't even think I have to read this. Again, excuse my glasses, my new ones are coming soon. And what it says is, today's feminist movement has a glaring blind spot, and paradoxically, it is women. Mainstream feminists rarely talk about meeting basic needs as a feminist issue, argues Nikkii Kendall, but food insecurity, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, a living wage, and medical care are all feminist issues. All too often, however, the focus is not on basic survival for the many, but on increasing privilege for the few. I'm very excited about reading this book because I was brought up in a hood in the projects as the only white presenting girl in my class. So I was around African Americans my whole life. Well, I shouldn't say my whole life, my whole childhood, my whole teenage life. And I think I know something about poverty and growing up in the hood and food insecurity and things like that. Of course, I don't know it from an African American perspective because I look white, and basically I am white on the outside, which gives me privilege that African Americans and other Black people don't have. But I do know some of the feelings about not fitting in with white feminism, because I was too worried about feeding my family, getting them a quality education, and other things that people who don't have the means and the privilege have to think about before they think about other things. Of course, like I said, I am not looking at this from me being African American, because I'm not. But I think I can see this a little bit more clearly than maybe some privileged white women would see it. But I'm so excited to read about, what other what African Americans are writing about it. And looking at the table of contents, it's really, really good. I mean, gun violence, hunger, it's raining patriarchy, how to write about black women, pretty for a black girl, pretty for ... but I think that's what it means. Black girls don't have eating disorders, the fetishism of fierce, the hood doesn't hate smart people, missing and murdered, fear and feminism, race, poverty and politics. So I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot about hood feminism. My other books take a little bit of a different turn. Last month I talked about reading some books that are being put back in print by Dean Press, or the Furrowed Brow series. And I read Miss Plum and Miss Penny by Dorothy Evelyn Smith, and I talked about that. And I became very interested through a channel that's Lil's Vintage World. And I started to look for other books in that genre from that author. And I was very happy to find one. It's going to be in the cards, and it's one of her first books. It's called Oh, the Brave Music. And there's not too much of a description of this book, so I can't describe it to you. But on Goodreads, it says there's people that read it that said, I read this decades ago and then reread it whenever I could find it in a library. It was the first book that I ever fell in love with, a bittersweet story about young love and growing up. I'm so glad to finally have my own copy again. To be fair, the print is a bit small for my elderly eyes. I think I was about 12 the first time I read it, but what a joy to find an old friend. I don't know why this book is so much better than her other books, but it is. This is the one Dorothy Evelyn Smith book that I think is truly worth reading, that truly stands the test of time and really should be known better for it. Well, I loved Miss Plum and Miss Penny, so but it hasn't been reprinted yet by anyone. But I was able to find an old copy, and it's coming soon, and I'm very looking forward to reading it. It sounds like it's a young adult book. And then I bought these, I think I bought these new, and it's by Elizabeth Taylor, also in the same vein, written in the 1950s and 60s. And the first one is Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. And Elizabeth Taylor, we're not talking about the actress now, we're talking about the British novelist who was, they say she wasn't as well known as she deserved to be. And I read Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, and I have to say that the first half of this book, I was laughing so hard I almost fell out of my bed. So it's really funny. It's really dark and it's really funny. It becomes a little sad toward the middle, and I haven't finished all of it, but I have a feeling it's going to end on a sad note. But basically, let me just give you a little hint of it. On a rainy Sunday afternoon in January, Mrs. Palfrey, recently widowed, arrives at the Claremont Hotel where she will spend her remaining days. Her fellow residents are a mixed bunch, magnificently flawed and eccentric, living off crumbs of affection and an obsessive interest in the relentless round of hotel meals. Together, upper lips stiffened, they fight off their twin enemies, boredom and the grim reaper. And then one day, Mrs. Palfrey encounters the handsome young writer Ludo, and an unlikely friendship is formed. This is really, this is really, really worth reading and worth paying for. So there's an introduction by another author, named Paul Bailey that I'm really interested in reading, because he talks about that he was in the book because he had written an article about her and her books and how they were not appreciated enough, and she sort of wrote him in the book, and he was telling us, you know, how he met her, and it's very interesting. It's a little spoilery, so maybe you shouldn't read it before you read the book, but I am very excited of reading more of her. So I picked up another book, and I haven't read it yet. It's called In a Summer Season by Elizabeth Taylor. They said this is her sexiest book. So I guess it goes with the MAE WEST book that I'm going to have to reorder from the library. So I'll just read you a little blurb. Much to the disapproval of her friends, Kate Herron marries handsome, feckless Dermot. I wonder if you'd pronounce it Dermot. It's an English name, I know. A man 10 years her junior. When Charles, her old friend, visits with his beautiful daughters, Kate watches happily as their two families are drawn together. But although she finds Charles' presence reassuringly familiar, slowly she becomes aware of subtle undercurrents that begin to disturb the calm surface of their friendship. Before long, even Kate cannot ignore the gathering storm. So I'm really looking forward. I read a few pages. I'll have to say that the one thing I didn't like so far was that the chapters are overly long. And I read mystery. That is my go-to place for happiness. And mysteries tend to have, not always, but tend to have shorter chapters. So it kind of put me off a little, that I was kind of, you know, okay, give me the hook. You know, the first chapter shouldn't go on this long, but that's just my personal preference. Okay, my last book is The Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot. Now we're going into literary fiction, and I guess this is literary nonfiction. I was going to join a readathon or a read-along with a few booktubers. One is Alba from Siriela, a Puerto Rican booktuber, as I am myself, and they had read the book Daniel Deronda, I think, and I haven't read any of George Eliot. So I got this late. I couldn't find it. It wasn't in my library, but I got it late, and I'm also Jewish. Like I said, I'm bicultural, Jewish and Puerto Rican, and I'm very interested in reading this. But I really want to read some of George Eliot's books first, and I missed the read-along, so maybe it was meant to be. So I'm going to try to find Daniel Deronda first and read it. I hope I'm even saying the name right. But this is by Gertrude Himmelfarb, and it supposedly tells the story of what George Eliot, her journey, it says, her odyssey about Jewish people. So I really want to read this. That's going to be the end of my February TBR. If you watch the beginning, I used to be a dancer, and this was one of my dancing outfits, and it still fits me, so that's good. So I hope you liked the beginning. That was me dancing not too long ago, believe it or not, and I still love to dance, but I have arthritis. But I hope you enjoy the dancing, the MAE WEST impressions, and if you like this channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you soon. Until then, aloha oi.